Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining another episode of the Product Management Learning Series. My name is Shavi. I'm the host of the show. Please drop in the chat where you're joining us from. So, the PM Learning Series is a series of live streaming events where we interview industry thought leaders and product practitioners to share about their product career journey, as well as lessons learned along the way for building great products to inspire current and aspiring PMs like you to level up your product career. So make sure you subscribe to our newsletter, which you can find a link in the event details tab to receive key takeaways and recaps from today's event, as well as future event updates. Today with me, I have a very, very special guest. Let me bring her to the stream. Hi, Jay-Z. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So Jay-Z is currently the SVP of product at Webflow. Congrats, Jay-Z, for your recent promotion to SVP. Very exciting. A product leader. Jay-Z is a product leader with a passion and talent for creating products people love. Jay-Z has spent her career building a number of really important products that many of us, have used before and have earned passionate followings at companies such as Airbnb and Dropbox. She's also an active angel investor, a lecturer at Stanford, and a course creator at Reforge. JC, I think I came to know you back when you were teaching at Reforge. I think it was one of the earlier series, and then I get to learn that you teach at Stanford and got friends connected us through the Stanford connection. But thank you so much for joining us today. I think folks are just starting to pick up, so please introduce yourself in the chat where you're joining us from, and we'll say hi to them from time to time. But thank you so much for joining us. And you have such an interesting career, spending so many different, product companies, as well as, things that you do outside of product. So I think with this 30 minutes, it will be really exciting to unpack some of these insights and how you're able to do so much with your busy life. So we have a lot to learn from you. But with that, maybe we'll start from, let's tell us about your career journey into product management. I was pretty interesting and excited to learn that you were actually a pivoter yourself as well. Product wasn't your first job, but tell us more about that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, in college, I didn't even know that product was a role. I was an econ. So graduated, was working in consulting, did economic consulting, strategy consulting, and I just really felt like I I was really craving being able to operate and actually make decisions as opposed to doing a bunch of research, presenting a point of view and hoping that the client would make a decision. And so that was the itch that I was really hoping to scratch. And so, I learned about product management. I also learned that I didn't think I could get a job in product management because, the Googles of the world were like, do you have a CS major or a CS degree? And I was like, nope. And so I actually made my way into product management through gaming. And it was because at the time, Zynga was really innovating and doing a lot of really interesting things. They were taking PM, or like the gaming industry was really interested in PMs who had that analytics background. And that's what I did have with my consulting work and with econ. And so I started at a mobile gaming company. And so that's how I got my start. It's hard to break into product. I'm sure a lot of people on this stream are feeling. So really finding those opportunities that resonate with your background and allow you to deliver value is a big piece of it.
That's definitely, we'll unpack a lot of that in a moment. But tell us about, I was a consultant before too, so I definitely resonate what you were saying about not just doing analysis and making recommendation, but actually, making the sausage ourselves and, making decisions and pushing the product. What would you say during your transition from consulting to product for folks who might be of a consulting background? Like what were your tips and what was hard and surprising about this transition?
Yeah. In many ways, it was very exhilarating because I think all the things I was craving. So when I moved into gaming, I just felt like I had that ownership, right? You owned, and I think gaming actually is almost to an extreme. I don't think that's necessarily always true for all the different products out there, all the different product roles out there. But with gaming, it was like you own the numbers. Morning, I woke up and I looked at my dashboard and I'm like, oh, this is how much money my game made. Either I was really happy or I was like, oh no, I need to do something. And so I think that level of ownership was there right away. Again, I don't think that's always true, depending on the size of the company you're at, depending on the scope of what you're able to own at that company. But some tips, again, this going back to this idea of you know what your background is, you know what you are naturally good at. And I think that leaning into that, so being able to say, hey, I'm actually able to analyze this data. I'm actually able to kind of like when I studied econ, I literally thought I would never use micro econ. I was like, what is this course? And then I was like, I'm balancing the economy. I'm creating a currency system inside this game. And so being able to lean into the things that you're good at and then being very open to the things that you don't know. I think a big tip of mine is it's totally okay. And in fact, I encourage everyone to ask for help. And that is a thing that I think is important throughout your career. Even as you get senior, I think the more you're like, I don't know how to do this, I've never done this before, help me, the more you're able to learn and grow and just take on more responsibilities. I think a lot of the time people are nervous to give someone responsibility when they're like, oh, this person is not able to flag when they're stuck, when they need help, right? And so really being able to like, hey, great, I can do all of these other things, but I've never, back in the day, I've never really worked with a graphic designer before. I've never worked with a designer, period. What does that mean? So help me understand what I could do to create the best content for my game, the best design for my game. I didn't play games. Actually, it's really funny. You worked in gaming. I didn't play games. And so really being able to go out there and be like, well, teach me what makes a game interesting, what makes it fun, right? Like going out there and asking for help. That's a big part of the transition that I think is really important.
Yeah, I think that's so important to understand. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness, right? It's actually a sign of curiosity, of strength, and asking great questions like, "Hey, what makes a great game? What makes it fun?" Is a really good starting point. I encourage a lot of our audience, to pursue that advice. I just want to say hi to a couple folks. We have a lot of folks joining from Seattle, Dallas, Netherlands, folks from India, New Delhi, from England, Nigeria, Calgary, and Canada. Yeah, friends, Atlanta, Brazil, and a couple folks from California. We have Honduras. Wow, Miami, Florida. Yeah, and folks love Reforge. So thanks for sharing our wisdom from with the programming. Folks from Dubai. Wow. NYC, Germany, South Africa. Thank you so much, folks, for joining us. Well, Jay-Z, let's dive deeper into this transition into product management journey as a career path, because I think almost every day, I think I receive some question from the community, wanted to get more advice. I know you're very, very passionate about helping people, especially women, transitioning and minorities transitioning into tech and more broadly to product. You teach your course at Stanford. I know you also create a course at Reforge. So to try to help this profession to make it more accessible to more people. So let's start from, giving a different advice to people, maybe a different career stage. Maybe start from the basic of let's say new grads coming into the workforce this year or about to going into the workforce. Maybe they are lucky enough to study computer science as a degree, but if not, what are some of the concrete things that they can do today to get themselves ready, to apply for that APM internship or apply for that PM job. And if it's too competitive, how should they think about the first job leading up to potentially pivot into product?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do want to make a caveat, which is, back in the day, it was very much like again, with certain programs, you had to have a CS degree. I'm really happy to see, and this is, very important to me, that it isn't like that anymore. Because at the end of the day, great products are built with through people from different backgrounds, right? And that is why I'm so passionate about diversity. And so I do see a world where you don't have to study computer science. I think that you can study a lot of different disciplines, and through those disciplines, you can bring a lot of different strengths to how you build a product. Because ultimately, in my head, it's not about how technical you are. You have an engineer, you have many engineers on your team to go do that. It's about, do you understand your users, and do you understand the business? And then can you think through those problems and those opportunities and come up with something that's really, really amazing and partner with everyone else to bring it to life. So I just want to really caveat that. I think that's important. But going back to specific, tangible advice for new grads. Well, first, I do think, there are, again, through the years, it's evolved where, product is really a discipline that a lot of companies recognize. And so there are structured programs out there today that were very, very rare in the past. So there are APM programs. I think that if you can get into some kind of APM program, some kind of structured program, that is always the best option, because essentially it means that company is ready to invest in you. The reality is, I think PM is very different than engineering. As an engineer, you go into a company and like literally in like a couple of weeks, like as you're ramping up on the code base, you are fixing bugs, you're adding value. To be honest, as a brand new PM, it takes you quite some time to add value. And so, if a company is like, hey, I'm here for it, I'm here to give you that support, I have an APM program, I have an RPM program, apply. Like that's my biggest advice for new grads. That being said, I think, a lot of people probably feel this. You're like, well, there aren't that many. And like, what if I applied and I didn't get a role, right? I didn't get that opportunity. Then I think this question of like, okay, what about you as a person? Like, what about you as a potential PM will make you special and make you be able to contribute to building a product? And there are people who really feel like they can shine in the data piece. There are people who can shine in like the user empathy and the research piece. Maybe it's the design piece. Maybe it's the marketing piece, like the communication piece. So there's a lot of different things out there that you do as part of the PM role. And so what I would then say is, okay, if you can't get that RPM program, APM program, well, first of all, can you get just APM role probably at a smaller company, right? Like, that doesn't have like an APM program or RPM program. But then if you can't get that, then I would say go and like lean into your strengths, go hone your strengths. And then as you are in a given company, you can make that transition. And oftentimes what a company is looking for when they're picking like a new PM that they're not hiring from external is, does the person that I could maybe pull into this role have unique insight on this product, on this industry, or on the users, right? And so if you go in there and you get that unique insight, you continue to add value, you have a chance to really transition into that role that you're looking for.
Definitely. I do wanted to ask a follow-up question here, maybe also tangential to the great segue for the next stage of your career, which is, let's say you graduated for a couple of years, maybe anywhere between 3 to 7 years. Let's say you have some strength, but you're thinking about, pivoting into product. What are some of the things that you can do? And then from our community, Sobabs is asking, how important is the PM certification? Let's say either from, Coursera or from, let's say, PM product school would help you in making this transition. Like, what role should certification play? Like, will you actually get a PM job after you get certified? Or how do you think about people with a couple years experience and then wanted to learn more about product skill and transition into product?
Yeah, I think it really depends. I think there are some companies, some parts of the world where like the certification actually really matters. And I think there are other places where it doesn't. My personal experience, I'll just speak to that, is it's less about the certification and more about what you learned through doing whatever coursework, whatever, learning that you're going after, right? So for example, if you take the Stanford course or the Reforge course, it's less about like, oh, I have this particular certification on my LinkedIn, but it's more like, hey, when I took this course, I'll take Reforge as an example. I was with a cohort of people and I met people and we learned together. And through that cohort or through that learning experience, I had access to a ton of guest speakers, right? And through the access to the guest speakers, I was able to network. Through the access to my instructor, I was able to have a point of contact who can give me opportunities from their network. I think it's a lot more around this idea of like a network and finding people who can be your advocate, which actually goes back to the question that you're asking around like, okay, what if you're 3 to 7 years into your career and you want to make this transition? My biggest tip there is find an advocate, and typically like at the company that you're at, right? Like find somebody who is able to transition people into the PM role, a hiring manager, a group PM, a director, whoever it is. Who can you find to be your advocate who will say, hey, Saurabh is amazing. Like this person knows so much about like our user. He's been like really working really, really hard. If I have a role, I want to give it to this internal person as opposed to going out and looking for someone externally. And so I think my biggest tip is that advocacy. And I think that when you look at these programs, be really thoughtful about like, how do I get that advocacy? How do I learn the most with the people I want to learn from? And with a cohort that I want to be learning from. So that's my biggest tip there.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree that a lot of people ask me or think about certification for the sake of a feeling like when they get certified, they'll get a PM job. But that's missing the point. Like you said, it's about the experience that you're gaining, actually building product through those programs, the network that you gain, and probably most importantly, the advocacy, the internal sponsor that you get either through this program or working for inside your company to gain that insight about your customer. Now, I do wanted to as the last stage of the career, folks, I sometimes get people who have maybe 10 plus years of experience, a pretty established leader, let's say in an operations space or in some other place. And then now they heard about, hey, product management is this cool discipline, new profession. And maybe they're at a point, like a pivotal moment in their career where they might not enjoy what they're doing for the past X number of years, right? But then pivoting, every time with pivoting, there's a bit of a trade-off, right? Are you willing to go back to individual contributor, maybe from a people manager position? So I get a lot of those questions thinking about, should I break into product if you already have, let's say, an established career? What's your mental model for thinking about that kind of like mid-career decision making and pivots?
Yeah. My thought there is, the opportunity cost is higher, right? For those people, in the sense that you do have, let's say, a decade plus of experience doing a specific thing. So I think that you should feel pretty certain that that's, going into product, something that you want to do. I do think there is I think, again, depending on what's your motivation, if you're like, I just really love this product role, like I think that I would excel at it, I think that it's scratching an itch that I can't scratch today and what I do, then one, really understand, like, will the product role do that for you? I do think in that case, you should be comfortable being like, okay, well, yes, in my function today, I'm managing many teams. I may have to start in a world where I'm an IC in the product role. But then maybe I'll just share a tip, which is like, for those people, I would really think about, okay, you have a decade plus of experience in something, whether it's an industry, whether it's a specific function. It's the same way of leveraging, right? This idea of like leveraging what you're good at. And so, for example, if you've worked for a decade in oil and gas, like, well, what's disrupting that industry today? And like, what are the companies? How do I go into those companies and start to do more of the PM role? Like, I think for most of those people, again, everyone's different, but it's less like, oh, I just want to be an IC PM. I want to start my career all over again. It's more like, hey, maybe I want to join a startup, or I want to do something where I'm essentially doing more of the PM like responsibilities versus the operational responsibilities, or, running a support team, right? And so find the companies out there that would really benefit from your expertise, and then go there at a ton of value and take on more of the PM roles or PM responsibilities. And then that's how you essentially transition. So again, it really depends on, like, am I going to restart my career because I just like want to actually just like work with a team, or do I want to flex what I know today and do more of the PM like things because I think that something I could be good at, or I can make more of an impact to a given company if I'm in that capacity.
Yeah, I love the flexing and thinking about doing more of the responsibility and making impact versus just chasing like, oh, PM is a really hot job, in tech, and I wanted to make that transition. Like, doing what's good, I guess, for you yourself, knowing yourself is probably better than chasing what's popular in the market. I
No,
want
I
to
mean,
maybe close.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'll just say this, which is like the hot role, and it just changes all the time, right? Like, what, 1 year or a couple years, it's product, maybe it's data science, maybe it's machine learning, like, who knows what it is. So I think the biggest thing is like really understand, what is this role, what what does it entail day to day. People are happy not because of a title or because of, they're happy because of the thing that they're spending every day doing is something that gives them energy.
Yeah, for sure. I know someone, as I was speaking, and I also noticed that 10 years is not the end of the career. That's what I would not try to say. But in terms of a career pivot, I
Absolutely.
try to cut it out for new grads, sort of newish grad, or like people with recent years of experience, and then more like an established career. I do want to wrap up maybe this part with like any special advice you'll give people for navigating like today's very challenging macro and with massive tech layoff. It's really not a candidate market, right? More employer has a lot of options to choose. What advice would you give to people, especially if they are looking to pivot and are competing probably heads on with product managers with years of experience? Like how should they think about career transition in this challenging environment?
Yeah. I think it is harder to pivot when you're trying to join a new company without any product experience and trying to land a PM role, because you're right, there are going to be other candidates in the market who might have a lot more experience. And so I would really recommend thinking about making that pivot more internally, right? Like, actually, I think that in this market, a lot of budgets are frozen. So the idea of a team going out there and hiring a brand new person or allocating headcount that way, it is harder. And so that actually presents an opportunity for someone who's sitting internally, for them to be like, hey, I'm raising my hand. I'm saying I can do some of this work. I can take a first pass at writing the spec. I really understand the user. Like, let me sprint a little bit more on the user research for this, or let me do some research on the market. Like, those are all things that you can raise your hand for, which start to really approximate the PM role. And then again, be your own biggest advocate. Make it known. I think there are a lot of people I coach or advise with, and they're like, I really want to go do this thing, but it's like, well, how many people have you activated to help you on your journey, right? Like, letting people at your company know, even your manager. I think this is really important. If you're going to try to make a career switch, you should tell your current manager, I love what I'm doing today, but I really, over time for my career, I want to make this change. And the best managers like really support you in that. So make it known, and there'll be more people to help you on your journey.
Yeah. Again, it goes back to your original, like at the very beginning, your advice around asking for help, right? Like activating your advocates, and don't underestimate how much you can do within your company and within your environment versus looking for something else new. So I wanted to transition to a different topic slightly, because I know that teaching is a great passion of yours, and you love teaching product as a discipline, as a way of thinking. So sometimes I'm really passionate about that too myself as a pivoter. But let's unpack that a little more. I remember the first time I came across you was actually reading one of the articles you wrote for Forbes or Wall Street Journal, I believe, where you talk about how you can identify customer needs and building products that really resonate with them. And you can apply that way of thinking to pretty much any kind of problem solving. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about how you would think about product as a discipline or as a way of thinking, especially in identifying needs, solving problems?
Totally. The number one thing I think I teach in all the different places that I teach is this idea of really starting with the problem, right? So many people jump to the opportunity, or sorry, jump to a solution. So, hey, it'd be really great if we could build X, or I see my competitors doing Y, therefore we should, fast follow, or, quickly copy them, or whatever it is. Taking that moment and being like, do we actually have user need here, user pain here? And then more importantly than just understanding the problem, I think this is really, really key. This idea of like, is there an opportunity? Is there an opportunity for me to address this problem, address this pain? Is there an opportunity that aligns with my business, what we offer, our competitive advantage, our skill set, our current product offering? That I think is like some of the biggest principles to distill away, not jumping too quickly to the solution space, really understanding the problem, really understanding the need. And then finally, that's not enough, really understanding if there's an opportunity to go address that problem, because that's how you build a best product, which ultimately delivers value both to the user and then captures that value for the business.
Do you have a process where you go and like understand deeper about the problem space?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times you leverage this idea of like research, right? So being able to say, hey, and it totally depends on where you are as a company in your life cycle. If you're going from 0 to 1, there's so many tools there where you're like, I don't have a product yet. I don't have a company yet. Let me understand the segment of the user that I want to serve. Where do I think I have like unique insight about the market? Being able to hone into like that area, and then being able to deploy research to really understand, okay, well, what are the problems and the pains? And then thinking about your opportunities and presenting those opportunities to your users to get validation. It also is true for when you're not doing 0 to 1. If you're more building a product that exists today or adding new features, right? Like, I think there you actually have a lot more data to work with. You can understand, how are people using your product today? What are the patterns? What's the data? What are you seeing? You have a ton of metrics, right? And so I think that the frameworks are, they do depend on where you are in the stage of the life cycle what you're building. But ultimately it is, hey, do we know what the user pain point is? Are we able to understand that through user research, through data discovery, all of those things? And then finally, I think this is the hardest part. Is there an opportunity that we can capture? Has a lot to do with you really understanding your own company, your own company's product, how you can go out there and build something that is better than what's in the market today. So I think that's actually the trickiest part. And then ultimately, there's so many tools and tips around actually landing on your final solution. Teach a lot around this idea of like diverging really thoughtfully and not, overly like widely, in the sense that like a lot of times people will diverge and they're continuously diverging and they're unclear on like, okay, well, how do I quickly converge to a really good solution that I can build in time? So there are a lot of frameworks there, but I would say the high level is these like 3 steps and making sure you're not putting them in the wrong order.
Right. I do really love the 3 steps that you break down. And increasingly, as also tying it back to our earlier topic, which is about building careers and navigating career transitions. And there's a lot to talk about as, managing your career like a product, right? Your career is your product. I know I asked this question of how would you structure a career as a product manager? I think I would put a spin on it by saying, how would you apply maybe that rigorous, the 3 steps that you use to analyze the problem, understanding the user, understanding if there's an opportunity for the company to maybe apply to thinking about your product career?
Yeah. I'll first start with this. Understand yourself, right? So going back to, I think we touched on this in different ways in the conversation today, which is just because there's a role, just because, you think that people are doing it, is it really for you? So understanding yourself, what gives you energy, what makes you feel fulfilled in your day to day, I think is huge. Like if you don't have an understanding of yourself and you're going after the product role, I think, and it's actually not a good fit, you're going to discover that. And that's just a lot more work than if you just knew from the beginning. So just a couple of things that's very tangible. So for example, if you're a person who really enjoys being in flow state, loves being heads down, loves having time to like do a bunch of stuff and on your own schedule, that's just not the PM role. The PM role is one where you are juggling a lot of plates, you are always multitasking, you're being pulled out of your flow state all the time, you're trying to create flow state for people. So I think it's a big thing, like understanding that about you. I think also understanding like, hey, if I want to have ultimate control, that's not the PM role. Like be a founder, right? Go do something else. Like the PM role is one where you are taking a lot of inputs, where you are trying to take things from a founder or, different parts of the org, trying to like really craft that story. Understanding, do you enjoy communication? Like if it depletes you to do it verbally, if you hate writing, not the role for you. You're going to be doing this a lot. How do you take criticism? Lots of criticism. Everyone has an opinion on the product. It's not good enough. Your partners on all these functions are like, well, I need the product to do X and it doesn't do it today. Your users are literally going to be like, this thing is not great. Like I wanted to do more. So just really understanding yourself and then all the facets of like being a good product person and just getting energy out of it. I think that's the first step. And then the second tip I just say is similar to like road mapping, right? You need to know where you're going. You need to say, this is what success looks like. And again, success looks different for every single person here. Like what each person wants out of their career or even out of a product role can look different. So start with, well, what do I think that looks like? And again, I think a lot of people like plan really far in advance. If someone were to ask me, Jay-Z, what's your roadmap for the next 10 years? I'd be like, I can tell you what it should feel like at this company 10 years later. I can tell you what I'm going to definitely do quarter by quarter now, but like there's shades of gray in between, right? So that same principle, applying it to your career is the same. Can you describe verbally to your friends, your family, this is what success really feels like in 5 years, and then work backwards. Well, what does that then mean for me to do in 3 years, in 2 years, and then finally this year? What are the things I want to do this year to actually make progress towards that? So I think those are the big things. If you take product, the ideas of like understanding your user, understand yourself, is this a role for you? Understanding like road mapping, starting with a North Star and working backwards, and then taking like iterative steps, right? Like a lot of product is like ship something, learn from it, and then move forward. So like take a step every single, call it, maybe a goal is every single month, I'm going to take one step forward. What does that look like? And then, keep yourself accountable.
Yeah, I love that. I love the working backwards, right, from your North Star, and then but iterate from here, so that you don't just hang up on like in 10 years, I don't know what I wanted to do, but you have a general sense of what you wanted to feel like or what you might want to do, and then you kind of testing different hypotheses and taking small steps and iterating and grow. So I love that advice. Also, during our intro, we mentioned that you have a particular interest in products that democratize access to technology, and in particularly technologies that help augment humanity in their ability to create, to participate, and engage with one another, right? Especially now that you work at Webflow, but back then, like Airbnb, helping people to, make additional incomes and whatnot. Tell us more about this passion. And then I think more specifically, I think a lot of us would love to hear where you see this technology, this future is heading with a lot of the low-code, no-code movements and the recent popularity of a lot of the generative AI technology.
Yeah. I personally love working on things that enable people and that people touch all the time, right? So when I was at Airbnb, I worked almost exclusively on the host side because it's something where it really makes a difference in their lives versus I think, again, it's really interesting on the guest side as well, but you travel only a few times a year. And so that's just my personal passion. But specifically to answer your question around like, where are things going? It's true. Like generative AI, it's like, it's really game changing. What I really believe is this idea of at the end of the day, over time, we want to enable humans to focus on what is inherently human. The idea of when you think about a creation process, right? It is on the idea generation. It is on the taking something and like tweaking it. We want you to be like a creative director versus spending all the time doing all the tedious things like coding. There's so many tedious parts of writing code. I'm sure a lot of people who are engineers on this call like understand that and know that. Even within the products out there today that exist in the market, you are doing a lot of very tedious things. AI has the ability to really automate all of those things for you, so you can focus your time on spending you can focus your time on spending it on what's the highest value, highest leverage things.
Yeah, I love that. I also love the sort of player coach mindset, right? You're a creative director, you're coaching the AI or using the other tools to do the high leverage activity versus being the actual player, being in the grinds of, all the nuance coding. And So
Yeah.
you got promoted to the executive position of a mother about a few years ago. You recently had your second born.
The hardest job.
Yeah, right. And we mentioned that you're doing so many things, right? You're having this such an interesting portfolio career, investing, advising company, lecturing at Stanford, creating this program, teaching at Reforge, and you started as the VP of Product Webflow in your third trimester. So what was your tip? Tell us a little bit more, like your story, your experience managing all these opportunities that comes your way, and how do you continue, or specific advice maybe to women that try to have it all, do it all. Like what's your success tips or best practice or tricks, to continue to play bigger and to be able to seize some of this opportunity to build a meaningful career?
Yeah, well, maybe I'll first just bust the myth of this idea of like kind of having it all. I think it is really hard. So to your point, yes, I started in my I started Webflow when I was literally my third trimester. So this idea of like having 90 days to onboard and then it was a real thing. But maybe just zooming out, this idea of like having it all. I think it's really just about like, what are you going to prioritize at whatever point in time? And I think you just have to be really, really cognizant of like the choices you're making. And I think a couple things that again you can take from like product discipline that you can apply to your lives. This idea of like portfolio management. At the end of the day, when you're a product leader, you're managing a portfolio. These are the parts of my business that I really want to invest in for the core. These are the things I want to do. That's like the next horizon. I do big rocks, medium rocks, small rocks. And so that same concept of like having a portfolio, you kind of have to look at your own life and be like, well, what is my portfolio? But the reality is, unlike your company, when it comes to your life, again, going back to like this busting the myth of having it all, it's just really hard. There are gonna be days where you're like, hey, I just can't. I can't spend the time I want to spend on work because I have a sick child and I'm going to go, like, I have to take a day off, right? Or the daycare is closed. Actually, really funny, there's no virtual background for this call. I always have a virtual background. If anyone ever works with me, there always is one, because literally I'm sitting in my bedroom. I have frames hung up on my wall that are empty because you can't have it all, because I hung up the frames and I haven't had time to paint or, print photos to put them in the frames. I have a snoo in my background. My second son has transitioned out of the snoo, but it's just still sitting there in our bedroom, which is where I work. so this idea of just like it's really hard. I don't think anyone should put the pressure on themselves to feel like they need to have it all. It's really like, okay, what do I care about right now in my life? How do I be the best version of that in those fronts? And how do I put it all together? And I think a lot of those pieces, a lot of the other things that I think just personally I'm very grateful for. It's like having a really supportive partner, right? Like it's virtually impossible to work and have children when you don't have a partner, when you don't have daycare, when you don't have, childcare, right? And so just being really, like being so grateful for the village it takes, for all the resources it takes to make all these things happen. That for me is just key. And again, going back to this concept of having it all, it's like really not really a thing.
No, yeah. I purposely throw it out there to spar a conversation.
No.
I'm
In
glad
fact, as you speak, my nanny knocked on the door, and I need to go nurse my son.
Yes.
This idea of
thank you for keeping it real. This is awesome, and thank you so much for having you on the call. I love that you can have it all, but not all at the same time. So you need to take a portfolio approach and prioritize, what's important at any given point in time. And then again, coming back to asking for help, asking for support. It takes a village to, raise the kid and do a lot of things. So thank you so much, Jay-Z, for joining us today. I know you have some urgent stuff that you need to cater, but this is really awesome to have you here. And folks, for those who join, we'll send out a recap of key takeaway from today's session, and make sure you subscribe to our newsletter. And I hope to see you in our next session, as well as reading Jay-Z's, interview notes coming Wednesday. And I think it's really resonated with the community. So thank you so much again for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so great to be here.
All right. Thank you. See you all. Have a nice weekend.
Bye, everyone.